It noticed that someone had already touched the soil before it. It was a stone, the size of a basketball, a whole basketball. It screamed in impatience. Suddenly, it rushed toward me. Everything began at the moment when children in our city started to disappear. Incredibly, kids were vanishing almost every day. And yet, the criminal still couldn't be caught. He was like a shadow. He worked quickly, unnoticed, methodically, with the cold-blooded precision of a predator stalking its prey. The criminal lured children into a trap and did something to them. No one knew the answer, except for me. I refused to let a criminal go without a punishment, or else it's my job to do so. My name is Jacob, and I work as a detective in our local town. At the same time those events were happening, either by strange coincidence or deliberate design, I had recently begun to suffer from nightmares. I slept poorly and became exhausted quickly. The horrifying dreams that came to me filled me with indescribable fear. As if scalding me with boiling water, I would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched and trembling like a frightened infant. But that night, I clearly hadn't woke up because of a nightmare. Someone had shattered my window. I jumped out of bed as if burned and rushed to the window frame, but I couldn't catch the vandal. Outside, everything was empty, and only a kindergarten stood motionless, immersed in the darkness of the night. That kindergarten stood right next to our building, and it had long been abandoned, but that concerned me the least at the moment. I quickly glanced at the clock, 3:45 a.m. Then, in the darkness, I tried to see the object that had shattered the glass. And for a moment, I froze. It was a stone, the size of a basketball, a whole basketball. I couldn't believe my eyes at first, and my mind seemed to shut down, refusing to accept that someone had managed to throw that boulder all the way up to the 7th floor. But the facts were undeniable. The impossible had happened, and the impossibility had unfolded right here in my own home. Later that evening, on my way back from work, I ran into my neighbor from the same floor. She was standing in the grocery store waiting for the cashier to ring up her purchase. I didn't look at her, but she saw me, gave me a polite smile, and turned slightly pale as if something had frightened her. "Good evening," she tried to appear confident. "You must be coming back from work." I gave her a tired nod. "Yes, you guessed right." I didn't intend to pay her any special attention and immediately began inspecting some fruits. But she came closer and tried to start a conversation. "Your window," she paused, as if regretting something. "I didn't sleep last night because of a toothache, and I heard when your window was broken. Did you see anyone?" I turned to her and made an irritated grimace, trying with all my appearance to show that this conversation is absolutely inconvenient right now. "No, I didn't see anyone. And even if I had, do you think it would change anything?" "Well, I suppose. I saw someone yesterday." She nervously looked around as if afraid someone might overhear us. "Something black, twisted," she said. "It was the one that threw the stone at your window, then slipped behind a tree." For a second, my throat went dry painfully, and I couldn't make a sound. Then, gathering a little courage, I looked at her straight in the eyes and asked again, "Something? It? In the neuter gender? So, in your opinion, it's not a living being?" She answered uncertainly, "I don't know what it is, but it's not human. I'm worried about you." She looked at me one last time, realized that I didn't want to talk, and turned her head for the exit of the store, quickly grabbing her groceries along the way. I stood there for a long time, watching fruits on the shelves, and then, having bought nothing, I went back home. That night I couldn't sleep, thinking about what my neighbor had said. Could her words be trusted? Could she have lied? And if she could, what would be the point? What sense was there in trying to weave mythical nonsense into this story? More and more questions teared at my head, stretching my nerves like guitar strings. I took a deep breath and approached the window. The broken glass has already been replaced, and through it I began inspecting the kindergarten. How sinister it looked. Because of the trees growing along the perimeter, it was plunged almost completely into darkness. The faint light that did manage to pierce the thick branches barely illuminated the crooked, rusty swings and rotten tables. Suddenly, I noticed some movement. Someone walked through the yard past the old sandbox. Someone in black clothing with a huge twisted hump. Out of fear, I jumped back from the window, trying to calm myself. Gathering courage, I approached the window again. Someone or something was rummaging there. At some point, I realized that this creature was digging into the ground. It was burying something, some white bundles. Goosebumps ran over my skin, and it felt as if I had been thrown into an icy bath. My legs went numb, my arms hung limply at my sides, and I felt utterly lost. My consciousness sank into a thick fog, and I stepped back from the window, collapsing onto the bed. What had I just seen? I had become a witness to such an event. That night, I couldn't close my eyes. Moreover, I didn't dare approach the window again. I lacked the courage. The next day, I decided to go to the kindergarten after finishing some paperwork in the office. Evening had already fallen as I returned home along the deserted streets. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon, and the first twilight settled over the city. I reached my apartment but didn't linger, quickly changed and went to the abandoned kindergarten. I went to the spot where the creature had been digging. It was obvious what it had been hiding there. To my relief, the gate to the yard was rusty and leaned to the side, so opening it didn't require much effort. I finally found myself inside, on the old abandoned playground. The crooked swings and rotten tables still stood, motionless in their places. Ahead lay the infamous sandbox, next to which the creature had been digging. The smell here was horrible. At one point, I even doubted the wisdom of my decision, and a minute later I noticed the bloody ground. It was still fresh, and I would have bet that it had been left there very recently. My God, it was horrifying. My knees trembled and chills ran down my spine. It felt as if I had run a marathon and without rest had come straight here. But retreat was not an option, so I began digging into the loose soil with my hands and a knife, which I had prudently brought from home. Soon I noticed that my hands had become wet. At first I didn't realize what had happened, but then the realization hit me painfully. My hands were wet with dark blood. I let out a terrified short scream before regaining a bit of my calmness, and horrifying realization that those were the corpses of the missing little kids buried underground. In this chaotic flurry, I didn't immediately notice that it had already grown dark, and somewhere nearby I heard a rustle. Someone was coming. I gathered the last of my strength to quickly crawl into the shadows. Fear gripped my heart, tightening my chest. At some point in the darkness, the outlines of a stranger began to appear. Yes, now there was no doubt. It was that very creature. It had a dense hunchback body, from which long, spindly arms extended like sticks, covered with pale, dead-looking skin. On its fingers, claws were visible. On its face, I noticed white eyes with tiny black pupils. Instead of a nose, there was a hollow, and its teeth were sharp like spikes. Suddenly, I heard a low, devilish laugh. It laughed to itself. My God, how terrifying it was to behold this scene. I sat motionless, barely breathing. My chest ached with pressure and sweat poured from my eyes. During the couple of years I have as a junior detective, never seen something more horrifying than this. I only just now saw the white bundles tucked beneath the creature's arms, the mutilated parts of a child it was carrying to this spot for its usual burial. After a couple of minutes, it gently set the white clumps on the ground. It was about to start digging, but then it noticed that someone had already touched the soil before it. The creature froze for a second, and the smile disappeared from its black, blood-stained lips. It began slowly turning its head, examining every inch of the playground. At some point, those horrifying eyes stopped on the bushes where I was hiding. It seemed to be looking right at me, and then it spoke. "Come out. Don't be afraid, detective." It laughed, and I clutched my chest, afraid that my heart pounding so violently might burst through my ribs. My head was overwhelmed by a new wave of fear. I nearly lost consciousness. "Come out, come out, come out!" it screamed in impatience. Suddenly, it rushed toward me. My pitiful attempt to flee failed. I was instantly caught by the devilish creature. It lifted me off the ground and slammed me against the fence. Then it pulled me closer, as if to examine me more carefully. That was the moment I had been waiting for. I seized the opportunity, sharply drew the knife from my pocket, and plunged it into its eye. An inhuman scream and a hoarse growl erupted. The creature released me and began thrashing around the playground. Rage consumed it. It was ready to tear me apart, but the hellish pain prevented it from doing so. I began crawling toward the exit. By some miracle, I reached the gate, stood up, braced myself, and shuffled along the road. Soon I was noticed by a police car patrolling the neighborhood. It was David and Michael, two friends of mine from the office, and they were on duty. They placed me in their car and started driving to the station. I slumped weakly into the seat and tried to rest, but suddenly the car was lifted into the air and slammed its roof onto the asphalt with a deafening crash. Shards flew across the cabin and the body of the car was grotesquely crumpled. The impact knocked me unconscious. I came to about half an hour later, or so it seemed. I was still in the car, but now in the middle of a forest, next to an oak tree. Not far off, a huge fire burned. I slowly began crawling out of the vehicle. Beneath me, the cool earth could already be felt. When I lifted my head, I saw David hanging from one of the branches. His body had been horrifically mutilated. I turned toward the fire and, oh God, the monster was laughing and jumping around it. In its hands was the body of my other friend, Michael, and it kept biting off pieces of flesh. The situation was hopeless. I had no weapon. I couldn't run as my leg was injured. Then an idea came to me. I searched the wrecked car and found a bag. In the glove compartment I located a lighter. Then I quietly began pouring gasoline from the tank into the bag. When that was done, I started crawling away from the scene. But as I expected, the creature immediately caught up to me. It grabbed me and dragged me toward the fire. I could hear its gleeful screams. I managed to strike its hideous face with the gasoline-filled bag. And it was the moment I should grab the lighter, but it had fallen from my pocket. That was it. Death was inevitable. The monster threw me down beside the fire. Without hesitation, it sank its teeth into my shoulder. Hellish pain burned through my arm, spreading through my body and torturing me. I screamed and tried to push it away, but it was all in vain. With my other hand, I reached toward the fire, trying to grab a coal. My palm was scorched, but I kept screaming and pushing through the agony. I grabbed the coal and struck the monster in the face. Its pale skin flared up, covered in blisters. The creature howled, tearing at its own face with claws, ripping the shared flesh until it collapsed. The grotesque body lay motionless, its head slowly finishing burning. It was dead. I could neither rejoice nor speak. My body ached, my shoulder bled. I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness, vision darkening as if falling into some uncharted abyss. I was dying. The taste of death, indescribable, pervaded my mouth and body. I looked up at the night sky and marveled at the splendor and beauty of the stars. How had I never noticed this before? How had I never admired it? Now I was ready to gaze at them forever. But it was too late. With every heartbeat, I felt life slipping away. I slowly closed my eyes. Darkness and cold enveloped me.